name is Gurpreet Banwait, and I am a product manager at FINCAD. Today we are going to talk about the top 3 mistakes corporations make with respect to their derivatives portfolio as seen by their auditors. Many clients come to FINCAD after they have encountered some issues with their annual audit. The typical response we get when we ask these clients how they heard of FINCAD is that their auditors found an anomaly with the derivatives portfolio when they ran a spot check and suggested they find an independent software tool to help manage this portfolio. This short audio is going to cover 3 of the more common mistakes that corporates make when it comes to doing valuations of their portfolios. The first mistake surrounds access to a reliable market data source. Some of the places we have seen people get market data from is through their counterparty, a friend who has access to another system, or they've scraped it off of some website. All of these places raise serious concerns about independence and accuracy. Also, receiving the data in this fashion makes it very difficult to prove to your auditors that you have done your due diligence on the data. A reliable market data source is required to ensure that the subsequent valuations that are done are correct. As the old adage says, garbage in is garbage out. And this applies very well to the market data being used to run your financial model. The challenge facing many organizations is to find a cost-effective source of data that contains all of the info needed to run the valuation. The second mistake is really a lack of documentation or understanding of the financial contract that you've entered into. This typically occurs when a financial contract has an embedded derivative that is not accounted for correctly. Even in cases where the derivative is accounted for correctly, when an auditor presses for details on the pricing methodology and the assumptions used, it becomes quite a challenge getting this information, and it's not readily available. The amazing thing is that this is one of the easiest things to rectify. All you really need to do is ensure that the solution you put in place comes with all the necessary documentation to prove the assumptions that you're making. Essentially, by not using a black box solution, you have knocked off the second most common mistake made by corporates with respect to their annual audit. The final and most important mistakes really surround valuation errors that are made. There are many different types of valuation errors that occur and that we've heard of. The first one is really relying solely on the counterparty's valuation. It's understandable why corporates rely on the valuation, and this is primarily due to the ease of receiving the valuation and the cost, which is typically nothing. However, this can really lead to more problems in the future and eventually become more costly than they're worth. An example of this is that it's nearly impossible to get all of the necessary information to satisfy your auditors if a question arises. Now, this really goes back to the earlier mistake I mentioned surrounding a lack of documentation. It's very difficult to get the details around the methodology being used from your counterparty. Also, there are going to be cases where this valuation is incorrect, and this has been exposed at audit time. Another common valuation mistake we have seen is corporates not conducting a true independent valuation, but rather relying on a close proxy. This is at least an attempt to get somewhat of an independent valuation, but it can fall short and actually ends up being more work. Using pricing comparisons to similar instruments can be a challenge when all of the details of the instrument being compared to are not known. For example, trying to find the exact value of an embedded derivative can be nearly impossible, as the proxy instrument may not have all of the same characteristics. The third valuation error is really where people rely on a spreadsheet and spreadsheet models where there's a high chance of input error. This can relate to input errors that occur when setting up the model with incorrect assumptions, either knowingly or unknowingly. It can also relate to general input errors that can occur. it can be very easy to transpose a date or enter in the wrong rate when creating a yield curve. We understand that spreadsheets are an important tool and that corporates continue to rely on them even though, year after year, they struggle with avoidable mistakes. However, there are systems and frameworks that can be put in place to help reduce these types of errors. To conclude, FINCAD's experience indicates that auditors typically find mistakes in 3 key areas when it comes to corporates and their use of derivatives with respect to their annual audit. The first is really not using an independent source of market data. The second is a lack of transparent documentation. And the third is really, in general, finding errors in the valuations that have been done that could have been avoided. This is what leads many to FINCAD, as we can help alleviate all of the above concerns. Our products include software and systems that can fully automate the valuation process, requiring no intervention from the user once the instruments have been set up. In fact, Fair Value Insight contains all the necessary market data and model assumptions needed to arrive at not only the valuation, but also risk sensitivities to major market factors. This can save our users days, if not weeks of time spent doing valuations and risk calculations over the year. For more information on Fair Value Insight, please contact FINCAD or visit www.fairvalueinsight.com.